start again?
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me all right? Yeah? I'm going to give you a talk through a lot of the work, obviously, but before I get to that, I'd like to start with just a brief intro of how I got into it, my influences, so on and so forth, my experience of it all. But I always start by saying there is no right and wrong way of doing this. You know, it's creativity at the end of the day. So this is just my experience, how I did things, how I think things should be done. You might disagree. And throughout the lecture, if anybody's got any questions, ask me as we're going along if it's pertinent to what I'm talking about. And I'll take some questions at the end as well, obviously. So the story actually begins in far back as 1973. And there I am, with our kids. And the reason I go so far back was, I mean, all kids are into drawing, I guess, but I really got into it. And my father, who was an incredibly talented illustrator, though he never made any money out of it professionally, he was a coal miner, he introduced me to drawing and painting and charcoals when I was about 7. And this is when my love of art and creativity finally took off. First took off, sorry. So, you know, as a young boy, I was into music, but just happened to be on the radio and the charts. But the first milestone of this story, passing me getting into art in the first place, took place in 1976 when I first came across the Sex Pistols. And it's hard to actually articulate now how important this band were at that time. It was beyond music, it was beyond art, it was just a nuclear explosion on the scene. It just turned everything on its head. The thing that struck me most of all was it demystified the whole design, creative music process. The man in the street could get involved. Very much a working class thing, and I just fell in love with it all. However, I didn't have the patience to learn to play guitar, so I thought I'd marry the two disciplines together that I was interested in, music and my love of art. So as early as 11, I set out to design record sleeves, which I was told by my tutors later on was too fine-tuned a thing to set out to do, which it probably is these days, I guess. But I was adamant, so off I went. And as well as the music, the work of Jamie Reid, who did all the Sex Pistols stuff, blew me away because, again, it was achievable, it was doable, it's stuff I was into. It harks back to Dadaism, 1930s Germany sort of stuff, which I was very, very much into at the time. And his typographical works as well. I still think that is, to this day, still the best typographical album sleeve of all time. I just think it's astonishing. So I'd kind of made my mind up I wanted to get involved in the music industry and do so via my design and my artwork. So by this point we're into the early 80s, and I then got into this American hip-hop stuff that was coming out of New York. Yeah, I think with all great musical movements comes a great artistic movement. This was no exception. In the early 80s I saw this stuff come out of New York, and it totally just blew me away that people painting trains like this. I mean, whoever thought painting a train, I couldn't understand painting walls, but actually sticking it on the train blew me away. So throughout my career there's been maybe 3 milestone-lucky meetings that changed everything. The first one came in 84, when I was just 18, and I attempted to do a graffiti piece like this on a wall in Wigan where I was living at the time, and it was noticed by this guy who was into record production, management, that sort of thing, and he arranged a meeting with me because he was expecting this sort of artwork to arrive in the UK sooner or later, but thought it'd be in London or Birmingham or Manchester. He didn't expect to see it on a warehouse wall in Wigan. And we hit it off, and that's when I started getting my first professional work. I started my degree when I was like 19, probably like you lot. But this was before I started my degree in Leeds. I was working professionally for his record label in Liverpool. And then he gave me the break of doing stuff for major labels. And this was the first album sleeve I ever did, from 1990. And they were a rap band, as the name suggests, from Manchester. But harking back to my punk rock influences, the purple disc, you see, is actually a copy of Nevermind the Bollocks that I got a soldering iron and burnt the letters out and built this collage behind it, backlit it and photographed it. But there's a running theme throughout the work that goes on from here. None of this stuff was done in Photoshop. A number of reasons for that. I couldn't afford a computer. And I just thought it was I pushed the boundaries as far as I could to create imagery that had actually been physically created, as opposed to digitally enhanced, if you like. So a job like this... Are there any photography students in here, by the way? Do you shoot on film these days, or is it all digital?
Film as well.
They're good. And the graphic students as well. I think it's essential that you have a basic knowledge, at least, of photography, because it's inevitable that sooner or later down the line you'll be working with photographers. The way we did this was, it's a double exposure. We blacked the scene out, poured lighter fuel on the record, lit it, shot it. It's on a large format, this 7x5, whatever you call it. Massive transparencies that big just to get the detail on it. And you had about 3 seconds to shoot it before the record just buckled. And then we'd shoot it again with a new record that was flat, all lit, double exposure to get that effect. And this was... I began to start developing a style here, and the style is, if you like, it's all image-based, 99% is image-based, and image-based with a narrative. That's a concurrent theme that runs throughout the work. So I was scratching around. I graduated in '88. I was getting bugger all work, really. I was poor as a church mouse. Then I had a chance meeting at this party in Wigan with a guy who was a lot younger than me. Seemed to have nothing in common whatsoever. And we got chatting, and I told him I designed record sleeves, and I'd set out to do so, and his comment was something to the effect of, most young lads want to be footballers or rock stars or DJs, but you actually wanted to be a sleeve designer. And I said, yeah, and he was going on about some band he was in, and I wasn't interested. And it transpires that was Richard Ashcroft, and that's where I met him. And I went on to design everything the Verve ever released in the 90s. And this next piece, following our first ever meeting, was my high-tech, incredibly detailed visual for the first single sleeve. And that was it. Now, he obviously believed in me because he had that, and he went with it. And if you see the record, it's astonishingly like it, to be honest. So, again, none of this was digitally enhanced. We all got to the park one day, set everything up and shot it. Photography students will know that's shot on infrared film. It looks like there's snow on the grass. There isn't. It's just the sunlight. Check it out. Infrared film. You can't beat it. But here's an important point. As it goes, the Verve were just starting off then, so they weren't that big. But imagine, you see later on some massive shoots. You only get one go at certain things. And it's not just photography, design, the lot. The point is, research and preparation are 9/10 of the battle. So you'll see, and every one of these pieces we did, we researched it incredibly thoroughly. I'll just show you a few outtakes from each one, otherwise I'll be here all day. But for that, Richard Ashcroft shot in the park as up front as maybe 3 weeks or so before each gig, because you've got to bear in mind this was all done on film. We had absolutely no idea what we were looking at until you processed the film and got it back, which was at least the following day. None of this shooting and looking at it on a laptop in front of you. So everything was researched meticulously. And I mean meticulously, because there was just no room for error. Which is testament to how much work we put in, because nothing ever had to be reshooted. To this day still, I've never had to reshoot anything. Next one. Again, quite remarkably, there's no digitisation whatsoever used in that shot. That waterfall is about 3 foot high. We got that effect by putting the camera on a tripod, which was about 6 inches off the floor. We positioned it on the riverbed, looking straight up the stream. That neon sign, you see the white wires going off to the side there, that's the power by a generator out of shot. The misting of the water, it's a time exposure. The shutter's left open, the water goes through, the camera can't cope with the visual information, thus you get that blurring. I think the funniest bit is the blue water. I'm literally a quarter of a mile upstream, out of shot with a dustbin full of blue food colouring, and we dyed the river. Biodegradable, nothing got hurt. And just to prove that neon sign is real, we dropped it after the shoot and broke it. There it is. And we were getting into our stride by this point. I love this one. Again, not only was there no Photoshop used in creating these images, there's none used ever retouching them either. That's cross-processed, so we basically shot it on negative film and it came back as transparencies, thus distorting the colours. I mean, this looks really like a serene scene. It could be like on a beach in the middle of nowhere. This is actually on Formby Beach, just in between Liverpool and Southport. And it's tea time and there must be 100 passers-by behind the camera watching what was going on. The model is stark naked and he was obviously a bit nervous about getting his kit off. So this is early doors version. This is 92 this, so he had very little money. So his fee for doing the job was a bottle of vodka, which he drank before this to give him the Dutch courage to get undressed. This next one, if you can see it in this light, it's the Verve's first album. Now you only get it really when you see it on vinyl, and it's basically 4 sides of one record that I'll go through here. One of my favourite pieces to date. This it crucified me doing this. Excuse me. The budget was minimal, but I was just so into this project. I was prepared to make nothing out of it just to get the job done properly. And the 4 sides of the sleeve depict like the journey of life, if you want. Again, no digitisation. Metal letters made by a fabricator near Oldham. We wrapped stuff around like the sort of stuff fire jugglers use, a cladding. Doused it in paraffin and set fire to it. Only problem was, by the time it went out, the cave was full of smoke, so it took us 4 hours to get 8 shots. So moving on the same sleeve. So you've gone from birth, the beginning here, this is like youth. The recklessness of youth, if you like. There's a car on fire in your front garden, you call the fire brigade quick sticks, don't you? These lot playing chess and reading the paper. Again, I bought that car for 60 quid from the scrapyard. Still going. Drove it to the site, set fire to it. The heat off that car, I mean, it looks like, again, dead serene scene. We got like 8 seconds from lighting it, shooting it, and their band had just run out of the way because the heat was so intense. Move on to middle age, where you've got this guy who's lost his way in life and just sits in the cellar watching a video relay of himself. Back to old age. Again, these are all people that I knew. I never used professional models or actors. It wasn't a budget thing necessarily. But I thought, if you get somebody in for the day who's just, it's just another job, he's not necessarily going to get into it. So this is my mum and dad's next door neighbour, for example. And again, his fee was a bottle of whiskey for doing this. And this, you see that's a big polystyrene hand that's put in. I've always wanted to use one of these things. It's the first time I've ever done it today. See that one? That's a huge polystyrene hand that's put in the cemetery. Microdot, we used to operate in a bizarre fashion because we never asked permission to do any of this. Because the way I looked at it was this: if you say no, we're fucked. We've got to just go and do it. And if we get stopped in the middle, well, we'll have some stuff anyway. We were doing this, and a funeral procession came into the cemetery. Oh my God, what if they're burying that guy here or next to us, sort of thing? But they weren't, and we got away with it. By this point, I did actually have a Mac by this point, but I still wanted to stick with the non-digitised theme. We shot the band in a studio in Manchester in black and white. Printed it, 12 by 12, black and white photograph, and hand tinted the colour onto the faces. Copied that onto a large format transparency, and that's a 50-foot projection against the wall. Again, you can see the crack in the door down Richard's face there. See that? That was the pipe running across Pete's nose. That's the details that were in the words that we shot in. So that was astonishing. I can imagine seeing that 50 foot in front of you, and then Pete the drummer just walked through there to give it that detail at the bottom. The back sleeve of that, I always tried wherever possible. I mean, my way of working was just to immerse myself as much as possible into the band's project. So I'd listen to the words. Half of the time I was in the studio when they recorded this album, just to get me head around what they're doing as much as possible and reflect that in all aspects of the sleeve. So this is the back sleeve of the same album, and there's a lyric in one of the songs which goes, "I was buying some feelings from a vending machine So, you know, we had a little bit more budget by this point, so we just hire in these props and stage them ourselves. And again, this obviously bereft the type. The back of the sleeve's got a track listing on the bottom, the barcode in the top right, but that's the image for it. And as well as taking inspiration from the music itself, you know, people often ask me, well, where do you get these ideas from? Where does it all come from? Just anywhere and everything that surrounds me. The next image is a case in point. This was an American, or was it American? No, it wasn't. It was UK's, just B-sides collection. And I was heavily into Reservoir Dogs when that first came out. And just the little things like, you know, the way the guy's dressed and his demeanour, and just that psychotic theme running through Reservoir Dogs, that's behind all this, basically. And, you know, I bought this, it's not a pinball machine, it's a bagatelle machine. I don't know what the difference is, but painted it myself and we shot it. So I think, especially these days, because everybody seems to be computer obsessed, I mean, I know you can't work without them, and they are part and parcel of my daily working life, but I think you've got to look beyond it, you know, and get your hands dirty sometimes, physically making things. It can only be for the good, I think. Having said that, you know, this is just my opinion. I mean, I do a lot of entirely digital stuff as well, but I just like making things and photographing it. This one here, this was shot about, well, it's in Edinburgh, so it's just down the road from here, isn't it? Again, looks like that type's been put on there afterwards. It wasn't, it was a silk screen border with that holding in the street. Quite quaint shot, you can't really see it on there, but if you look at the cuffs of his jacket, they're all frayed, and it wasn't sort of some studenty, arty statement. He was genuinely skint at this point, you know, we all were pretty much, but fastest shoot of the lot. Most of these went on all day or sometimes over 2 days. That was pouring down rain, it's freezing. Richard said, I'll give you 20 minutes and that's it. So that was a 20-minute shoot. I was banging on about preparation, research, scouting for locations, but sometimes you just drop on. We shot this in New York City on 42nd Street, which was the place where they're all porn cinemas at one time, basically. If you've ever seen Taxi Driver, the movie, that's shot on 42nd Street. They're all X-rated cinemas. They're all shut now. And it's just pure luck. We're walking down 42nd Street and some installation artist had dressed, there were about 10 cinemas in a row with all these big foyer things hanging out. And he'd dressed them all by putting these mad slogans on. So we shot beneath that, and unbelievably, this was the band's last single before they split up. So everybody's like, oh, you must have had some inside information, you must have known it, but it was absolute fluke that we got that there. Having gone from these grandiose, massively time-consuming shoots, by the time it came to the third album here, Rich was just like, oh, I can't be arsed, just a picture of us lot, let him listen to the record, that was it. View of it. A lot of conspiracy theories. Nick, who sat to the left, him and Richard were always falling out, and that was often quoted as the reason why the band split up. And this is supposedly, you know, visual metaphor for that. He's looking one way, the rest are looking the other. It's nonsense. They just happened to be, the band happened to be looking at a herd of deer that was sweeping past. It's in Richmond Park in Surrey, and Nick just happened not to be looking. So that's that. I've had subsequently since as well, it says love in the background, L there, his hat says O, there's a V there, and there's an E there somewhere. Nonsense. It doesn't say that at all. I've read it on websites, that's what it says. So started getting into different ways of working. All the stuff you've seen beforehand was bespoke, and by that I mean it was shot specifically for each release. These images, whilst I think suited the record, were actually from a folio of a photographer who came and visited me one day. I just loved his stuff. So that was a first for us. Obviously getting slightly different as well. There was typography on the front, which had mostly in the past hadn't. The lettering had been included within the photography. So, you know, you've got to keep progressing. If you start doing the same thing forever and ever and ever, you know, it just gets a bit boring, doesn't it? But the next sleeve is probably my least favourite Verve sleeve that I did. And my least favourite single as well, to be honest. Because, and this is something no doubt you will encounter in your professional lives, you'll have been working for days, weeks perhaps even in your studio, and you think this piece you've done is the dog's bollocks. This is it. It looks fantastic. And the client's just like, nah, I'm not doing it. I don't like it. And you're just distraught. Well, you just get over it and get on with it, because that's the real world, unfortunately. And what I'm getting at here is, these were kind of mock-ups for the sleeve in the first place. Richard knocked it back because he said it plays too much on the death trip, because the song The Drugs Don't Work, it's not about narcotics, it's about medical drugs that couldn't save his father from dying, apparently. But he didn't like that. I think that's infinitely better than what actually went out, but, you know, I'm not the client, if you like. Similar sort of thing illustrated again further here. We shot this in New York again on a different trip. I took these photos and I thought the next shot was infinitely better. Richard thought it was too Ashcroft-centric and not Verve-centric, if you like, but I thought that was a better shot, and I thought that worked better as a sleeve, and I thought it said it all about him as well. But you know, you just got to get on with it. Obviously I work with a lot of bands, and you know, I've been at it 20 years, and this is only a snapshot of my work, but I'll show you some stuff I did with other bands and illustrate how working with one client to another differs. With the Verve, it was almost exclusively Richard and I would work things out, and I just get on with it and come back to him, report back to him, but I was very much the creative driving force behind it. When I started working with Suede, for example, I almost became a technician insofar as I was just replicating exactly what Brett Anderson wanted. Some things work better than others. I'm only going to show you the ones I like, obviously. I'm not going to show you stuff I don't like. But we did some stuff that I thought was rubbish in the end. But again, you're reporting to a client. You know, you're not fine artists, if you like. I wouldn't have done some of the stuff that he wanted me to do had I had the choice. We actually shot that. That's not far from it. That's some stately home round here, that is. The next one, it had got worse. But I like the image, actually. But this one, he just gave me the image and I just literally put the type on it. Again, different way. I would never have done that for a Verve sleeve. I mean, using found imagery, all right. Found imagery that I commissioned or found imagery that I got in specifically to do, but you know, still from a film that other people might have seen. It was everything I was against at the time, really. Having mentioned the fact that we never used to do anything digital, like I said, a lot of that was down to the fact that I didn't have a Mac until '95, and then I was just so into the working for real, if you like. But this was a milestone Microdot sleeve insofar as it was the first totally digital thing we ever did. All the images are of the same guy, obviously. It's Howard Marks, the cannabis smuggler, and I was issued with the real sort of black and white passport photographs that we got to start with, and we came up with that. And you've got to bear in mind, the machines we were working on at that time probably had a RAM of 256 meg. So we had to back each one of those little images up onto a disk because the computers couldn't hold all the information to create just one sleeve image. I mean, I bought a memory stick the other day, 4 gig on it. So just how it's gone crazy now, it's just incredible. Keep these in here. This is another chance meeting. These are actually my trainers. I didn't design them out like that. I bought those shoes in Rome. I took my mother to Rome for her 60th birthday, because she's a big Catholic. And I bought these shoes while I was there. And it leads me on to the next chance meeting. I was in this lift in Manchester, in the building where I had a tiny little studio. This was '93. And this guy gets in the lift. I'd never met him before, I hadn't got a clue who he was, and the first thing he ever said to me was, where the fuck did he get them trainers from? Because you couldn't get them in England, and that's how I met this fella. That's who said it to me. And we just get chatting in the lift. This is a true story. I mean, talk about lucky. We just get chatting in the lift. What do you do? I design record covers. Said the same to what Richard had said years before. What have you done? And at that point I'd done 3 early Verve singles. It was like, no way, I love that artwork. Right, I'm in a band. When we get signed, not if, when we get signed, I want you to do the artwork. Then he got out the lift. And that's how I ended up working with Oasis. True story. So the first thing I did for him, because obviously if you're doing a sleeve, was the logo. And this came from a meeting. I mean, I've met Nolan and met Liam before as well, but I never met all the band together. And I met them backstage at this gig in Sheffield. They were supporting somebody, I can't remember who it was. And one thing I never do when designing record sleeves is refer to other record sleeves, because I think you just run the risk of becoming derivative or knocking out pastiches, which is something I certainly don't want to do. So I tend to refer to fine art books or just things I see around me. But I took a load of books with me of classic album sleeves, just to get a feel of what they were into or what they weren't into, you know. And you'll notice, in the old days, record companies used to put the logo of the record company on the front of the record. So, that Decca logo there is actually the record company's logo. And I just thought to myself, that would look amazing if you took all the type off of it and just had that logo on there. And that is how the Oasis logo was born. Look at it. It's a Decca logo. I mean, we're going to use that. The font at the top is the same font Adidas used pretty much. But from a distance, it looks too much like Oasis. So it's changed to this. That's Universe Black Italic, I think it is in the end. But it was nicked, and nobody picked up on that. But it's the Decca logo and the way it's positioned. And you'll see it in situ next. That's how we applied it. We spent so much time staging these shoots, I didn't want to obliterate it with a load of typography and put a single name on the front, because I'm a believer, so what, it's got a single name on the front, doesn't matter, especially not with a night like this. So I campaigned tooth and nail not to have any type on the front, and won obviously. But again, we had them for a day or two, and you couldn't go away. We shot this in South Wales, and you couldn't go away and come back, sorry no, the film's all fogged, or you know, the composition don't look right, we'll have to do it again, because there just wasn't the time for that. So this is the first ever Oasis physical mock-up that I did, and if you look, the logo still hasn't been developed into the new one yet. But that's in the same room. That was the recording position. When we were recording the record, that's how it all looked. But aesthetically, the composition looked shit, so we thought we can't have that. So we just repositioned everybody in the room to give us that view. Talking about the bespoke nature of each release, a lot of record companies have an in-house generic label that goes across every record. That's very, very common. You don't get them anymore because nobody makes records, obviously. But what we wanted to do was dress each release individually. Obviously, it cost a wee bit more to do. But my argument was, you're going to have to print a label anyway, so why not print something that represents the specific release? Then we did this. Sleeve I'm very proud of. Again, it looks like they just happened to be sat there, but weeks of preparation went into this. Even down to what's on the telly. That's a freeze frame on a VHS, would you believe? It's a still from The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, which was Noel's favourite film. So, you know, that level of detail we got it down to. Previous to actually getting the band in, I was in the house a couple of weeks beforehand. You see a very young version of me there. And we shot me, and this is Bonehead's wife. This is his house, actually. Shot me in every conceivable position in that room. Printed them all off. Then I got a sheet of tracing paper with an empty room. And I physically built up the composition by tracing myself onto different places. And the shot where Liam's lying, he saw one of me lying on the floor and he said, right, that's what I want to do. So whilst it looks as though it's just a snapshot fly on the wall, that was remarkably posed shot. And just another one here, you might have heard this story before, the wine glasses and the carafe are full of Ribena. The typography on the front is my handwriting, and it looks like it's just one pass. It obviously wasn't, because I mean, if you look, there's some terrible versions. Look at that, it's awful. And they're definitely made it actually composite 4 parts: the D, the F, the M, and the A, B, or A and B. So there's 5 bits. Again, I used to love working with photocopiers. This is all done on photocopiers. I photocopy it, you know, physically cut it out, paste it together with glue, photocopy it again. That's how we used to work back then. I mean, in fact, that record, the artwork wasn't even delivered digitally, let alone shot digitally. It was done up paste-up board, old-fashioned style. And again, inspiration for this one, not necessarily this painting specifically, but this genre. This is by Van Eyck, and I think it was done 1400 or something like that, which is astonishing. I'm a massive fan, not necessarily visually, of Belgian and Italian Renaissance paintings, but I just love the narratives of them. If you look at the detail on that, it's incredible. You can't really see this, it's a pretty bad scan, but in the mirror there's an exact replica of the back of their heads. And, you know, I don't exactly know what the narrative is. It's called the Arnolfini wedding, so she's obviously pregnant. All these little things are symbolic of something or other. And if you look, that's basically what we were doing here. You know, there's loads of Burt Bacharach picture there, because Noel's a big Burt Bacharach fan. And it goes with just little things dotted all there, just to give it a bit more of a narrative. So yeah, fine art. When I did my A-level art, there was an art history section to it. And that's where I picked up most of me, not so much knowledge, but I identified what I liked and what I didn't like, and what influenced me and what I wanted to read into further. And this kind of stuff, you'll see more art influences later on, but like I said before, I never really related to any of my peers what they were doing, mainly because I thought they were rubbish, and two, because I didn't want to end up replicating what anybody else was doing. This is one of my favourites. Again, back to the point of not using models, professional models that is. That's my dad with a wheelbarrow, my mum with a mop. That's Matthew, who's my assistant at Microdot. The girl on the platform is the barmaid out of my local, who I fancied, but it didn't work. The guy with the watering can's Noel Gallagher, and that's Liam Gallagher up there. This is the first #1 single. Again, this is a black and white shot, entirely unpainted, which is not as difficult as it sounds, because all you're actually doing is adding colour to tone that's already there. But it's a great effect, I think. And again, they were getting quite big by this point, so this had to be right. And the mad thing, I mean, I only remembered this morning when I was looking through this, actually. If you look at all the boarded up windows on the railway station, here's a test shot that we did the week before. I'd always be positioned in the shot so I could get some idea of scale and what have you. They're all boarded up black, those windows there. And on the actual sleeve, I photocopied them, so you can't even tell what they are. The bits of Noel's guitars, there's like an FO with a knob switch from it there, there's a machine head there, there's a machine head of a Gibson there. Why? Because we wanted to, you know. I know it's there anyway. Again, this one here. Cross-processed, no digitisation, that just came back from the lab looking like that. Not enhanced at all. Western Supermare Beach, Somerset. The reason we shot it there was we were playing Glastonbury the following night, and we had to find a location within striking distance of the festival. So, a fortnight beforehand, we drove the length of the Somerset coast looking for locations. Shot them all, come back, and finally decided upon Western. The pier's not there anymore, it's burnt down, hasn't it? But I just thought it was a great location. And just to show you what I mean, that's obviously, like I say, it's not enhanced, but it's cross-processed. That's what it actually looked like on the day. And that's just an outtake I did. And test shot previous week, again, me in it to give an idea of scale. Thank God it wasn't like that on the day, it was absolutely pouring down that day. And we went as far as we hired 5 deck chairs, and the guy said, well, there's only 2 here, so yeah, it doesn't matter, but give some test shots. And positioned them all up and down the beach. The point I'm getting at here is research and preparation. No substitute for it whatsoever. This was an interesting one. Well documented that Noel Gallagher's a big Beatles fan, so am I as it goes. There's a story of when, in the late 60s, Ringo left the Beatles. And when he persuaded him to come back, when he got back to the studio, his drum kit was smothered in flowers. So that was kind of the inspiration behind this. Budgets had gone through the roof by this point. A standard single back in those days, you were looking to get about £2,000 per single. We got a £10,000 budget on top of our fee as well. And we had 10,000 carnations imported from Holland. You can't get blue carnations, so 3,000 white ones. We had dyed blue. If you look there, there's blue carnations everywhere. We had literally dipped them in a pot of ink. The smell in that room was incredible. We spent a day just positioning the equipment and photographing that over and over. We even shot some stuff above that scaffolding gantry that weren't used, but that was just prior to adding the flowers. That's afterwards, sweeping them all up. 10,000 carnations, wow. Probably one of the more famous ones, shot in Berwick Street, contrary to popular belief. That's actually me in the beige jacket, with a guy called Sean Rowley who does Guilty Pleasures, I don't know if you know him. Again, for photography students, it was virtually black dark when we shot that, but it's 5, 6 in the morning. Evidence by, see that street light, it's on and glowing. But the shutter must have been open a good half a second on that to allow the lighting and thus the blur on the figures. I must have driven around every street in London that had a strong perspective on it and photographed it. Those are the test shot, that was done in Shoreditch. But there's something about that street, I just thought, look, just bang, the perspective looks great. The Wonderwall sleeve. The point behind this, I don't mean behind this, what I want to illustrate here is, when I was at college, I don't know what it's like these days, but I was always told that you had to have a reason for doing everything. Well, I completely disagree with that. Some things you just think look good, and that's the end of it. Some things are there because you just like it. You know, you don't have to explain to a client necessarily everything. You might have to make some of it up, but that's equally fair enough. But I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, I don't know, fuck it, I just like it, you know. And that's the point I'm getting at here. It's got nothing to do with the record whatsoever. And it's totally influenced by my love of René Magritte and his series of images through pictures or paintings of exactly what's behind it, if you see what I mean. So that's where I was coming from there. Started cheating by this point, because one guy appears 3 times in this. 1, 2, 3, same guy 3 times. Because when there was just a bit of a gap there in the end. Again, there's my dad with the tash behind Ellen White's head, see? He's on more Oasis sleeves than anybody other than the band. That's a true story. Again, this was research meticulous. They all look like, well, I've been research meticulous. It's just a shot of the band, load of people, but you can't leave anything to chance. Here's a shot I took of Liam photographing the sheet. So if you look back, it looks like there's hundreds of people, there's a massive scrum, but when you actually look at it, that's all it was. There's Liam photographing it. We did a lot more than just the record sleeves, obviously. Pretty much everything that was in the 90s, I mean, they went crazy Oasis after that, and I think they all went downhill when they stopped using my logo, basically. I firmly believe that. But we did everything, posters, press ads, brochures, and you get a hint at I very, very rarely use anything other than sans serifs. It's just the way I do it, and I very rarely use anything other than maybe 3 or 4 fonts, apart from headline fonts or logos, but body copy, you know, always sans serif, and it's all down to this guy here, who is my typographical hero. Anybody who doesn't know about this fella, you've just got to get into him. Write his name down, check him out. The guy's amazing. He's dead now, obviously. But he only ever pretty much used one font. And if you see his work, it'll just blow you away. He's a Swiss guy. And he established his studio in 1932, I think it was. And he was 28. Does that make sense? Yeah. 36. 22 he was. And he used one font, which was Accidens Grotesque, which was designed in 1896, if I'm right. and was the first commercially usable sans serif font. It was a forerunner to Helvetica, what Helvetica was based on. But check this guy out. So basically, I'm going to go now from the music business onto more corporate clients and show a bit more typography, printed mediums, and so on. So again, the way I look at Muller Brockman's work is this: he was the best. I'm never going to beat him, so I might as well just get on the bus with him and just do what he was doing. So again, it's just, the way I approach typography, I think it's not so much where you put the letter in, it's where you don't put the letter in that's important. It's all about the use of space. Clearly, this is an annual report for the International Rugby Board. It could have been half as thick if I'd have put all the text on and filled the pages with it. But if you look on there, there's perhaps a third of the pages filled with copy. So while I went mad and put a bit more copy on the page there, but you get the point, That's classic Swiss style. I just love it. I just don't think it can be beat. Again, use of space all around it, in conjunction with large imagery. So from the International Rugby Board, what we tried to do back in the 90s was expand beyond the music industry. And I thought there's no point approaching a client like Deutsche Bank or somebody because they just won't get what we're doing. So we approached sets of similar industries like fashion and more. The way I looked at it was this: approach brands whose customers were likely to be into the bands we work with. So, for example, Converse. And it worked. We got loads of work out of companies like this. This was a press kit. They wanted a non-event specific generic press kit. There's not a drop of ink on it. It's all blind embossed. And the reverse of it was just the classic Converse footprints. Again, the point I'm getting at here is, design for print is as important as it ever has been. Don't think otherwise, Just because everything, or a lot of stuff is digital online these days, I still get excited about tactile nature of print material. So I think different things you can print on. Far and few between you get exciting projects where you can run wild and just, print on metal sheeting or whatever, but jobs do come up like that. And I think it's interesting every now and again to keep your eye in looking at interesting things to, again, it's back to that physical making stuff again that I'm into, really. Letterheads that went with it, again, it's just as sparse as you can get. That's non-event specific, just the logo on one side on the letterhead, and the reverse of the same sheet of paper has got the footprints on the back. Absolute Vodka, a fantastic client to work with. This was an industry newsletter, and they complained that people were just throwing them away. I thought, well, if I design it, I promise you nobody's going to throw it away. It was a massive A2 sheet, and the reverse of it was a limited edition numbered print by whoever had won the Turner Prize that year. These came in a Perspex box. And again, if you look at the typography, one font throughout, just different weights of the same family. They were good. They just let us get on with it. Levi's approached us to put together a press pack launching the Twisted Originals jeans. And we kept banging on about this engineered jean, this ergonomically designed, it was all very technical. So we printed this stuff onto tracing paper with a graph paper print onto it. So we cheated, it's not real graph paper, we print it onto tracing sheets. And it came rolled in an aluminium tube, either here being intent to look like, architect's plans. Or, technical drawings. That's the emphasis. And this one went out to magazines that wasn't actually advertising the launch of the jeans, but advertising the launch of the TV adverts coming on the telly. So what an advertising budget they had. And we're getting kind of around to full circle here. This is a very recent piece that I did for a band from Chicago. The reason I've included this, it takes analogue creativity, technology if you like, and, well, I'll tell you the story behind it. That's a composition of two shots. It's the Berlin Wall, which I photographed in 1986. It's obviously one over the other. There's the one shot. Obviously shot on film, it was 1986. That's comped with that shot to give us the sleeve image. The first time I went back to Berlin was just this New Year. First time I've been back since the wall came down. And I did some more photography, pretty much of the same place. There's hardly any of the wall left, but bits of it are left. And these two bits here, I photographed again, comped it together, overlaid it over the other stuff I've done, which became the back sleeve. So it's the longest piece of work in history, isn't it? It's like 20 odd years in the making. Front stuff, that was all shot digitally. The front sleeve shot analogue, all comped together to create this album sleeve for this new band. And that kind of takes me full circle. But if you want to follow us or get in touch, there's all the details. And thanks for listening.